Jeff, so you were very close to sort of the mainstream media machinery around the time of the Iraq War invasion. What do you see as the big differences between the way this war in Ukraine is being covered versus, U.S. Incursions into the Middle East in the very beginning of the 21st century?
Yeah, well, it's night and day. I mean, I lost my job at MSNBC. I was an on air pundit and a senior producer because we were asking questions about whether to invade Iraq. And I was there in mainstream news. I was at Fox when 9/11 happened and the US invaded Afghanistan. And when the US invaded Afghanistan, everyone knows that there were these CNN memos from the heads of CNN to every anchor, basically saying you need to play down Afghan civilian toll. And if they ever alluded to an Afghan civilian who was killed, the anchors had to repeat the same saying over and over. And in a memo, it said, this may start sounding rote, but you have to do it, which is the US invasion of Afghanistan is in result of a terrorist attack that killed 5,000 Americans. You had to say that every time. And so there's always been in the mainstream media, everyone in the newsroom knows it, that you're supposed to look away from civilians that are the victims of US military. That's a given. So then when Russia's horrific invasion of Ukraine happened, all of a sudden, these same journalists that I worked with and anchors like Lester Holt at NBC News, these same people I worked with, all of a sudden, all they could cover was the civilian victims of the invasion, meaning the Ukrainian victims of the horrific and criminal Russian invasion. You saw, gee, this is what coverage should be. In modern warfare, it's not World War I anymore. In modern warfare, it's not like soldiers shooting at each other and the civilians are off to the side. The main victims are usually civilians. And the main victims of US invasions have been civilians, whether it was the US invading Panama in 1989, invading Iraq in 2003, invading Afghanistan in 2001. Civilians have been the main victims. There's no doubt about it. You can just do the counting. But they are excluded if they're victims of US militarism. And they're pushed to the forefront if they're victims of Putin's militarism. And yes, a lot of it is racial and a lot of it is ideological. But it's something that we have to understand that both wings of the corporate media, whether it's the Fox News right wing or the MSNBC, NPR centrist wing of the corporate media, they share this Cold War mentality, which is that the US wears white hats, that the US is always on the side of democracy and human rights. And if we aren't, it's just by mistake and will be quickly corrected. And it's this insane ideology of the mainstream media that propels the nearly $900 billion Pentagon budget, which is where we started. It's the reason we don't have free or inexpensive higher ed and universal health care, unlike all these countries in other parts of the globe that do have those things, because we are policing the world. It's what Martin Luther King Jr. called the demonic suction tube. That's how he described the Pentagon taking all the funds that should be going to poor and working class and beleaguered middle class Americans and shifting it to these 5 or 6 military contracting corporations that all have their offices and their lobbyists in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. That's where the money's going. And you just can't have that discussed on MSNBC. It's not just Fox News or, on all of them, they will not discuss where is the wealth of our society going. And it's partly because they have this American exceptionalist ideology that always needs a Cold War enemy. On Fox, they emphasize China. Why aren't we being more tough on China? And on MSNBC and CNN, it's both China and Russia. But they're always in search of an enemy. And some of the main sponsors of the news are not just the pharmaceutical companies and the health insurance companies, they're actually military industrial companies. And Wall Street makes profits off of all of it. Wall Street loves the military budget. Wall Street loves our privatized education. Wall Street loves our privatized healthcare system. They're making profits on every sector of our economy.